So I've just entered the Roman bath, and that's the entrance there. Yeah, and that's me.
Which can help us
So
understand
that's the
story
first
of the
look
baths.
of
And if you want to hear these instructions
Roman
again at any
baths.
time during your visit, press number 1 and then play. When each commentary is over, as this one is now, you'll hear this sound.
So inside it was pretty warm, and now we are out in the open and it's pretty cold now.
There's no number 2. To begin your tour, press 85 and then the green play button.
You're looking out over 2,000 years of history. Down below is the Great Bath, once a luxurious hot swimming pool. It was built by the Romans soon after they invaded Britain back in AD 43. They wanted to make their new home as much as possible like their old home back in Italy, complete with public buildings like temples and bathhouses. But for most of the 2,000 years they've been here, the Roman baths beneath our feet have been hidden. After the Romans left, new generations built on top of the ruins, so the ground level got higher and the ancient buildings were left buried far below. It was about 300 years ago that the first exciting discoveries were made. They showed that there must once have been a temple here. As new finds emerged, it was obvious that this was no ordinary archaeological site. But it wasn't until the late 19th century that the Roman baths themselves were discovered.
So as you can see, there are fumes rising above this water, clearly indicating that the water is quite hot. It's a natural hot water spring here, very much like Manikaran in India. But in Manikaran Sahib, you are allowed to take a bath. Here, you are not allowed to enter this area. So from this angle, you also get a view of Bath Abbey, which is the building behind the bath. and sculptures.
Just meet friends. And, of course, there were all the staff. The baths were immensely busy and popular. A place like this took a lot of upkeep. Imagine a big modern leisure centre with a flourishing church attached. That gives you some idea of the number of workers and visitors who would be in and out on a daily basis. Here, we see people from all walks of life, from stonemasons to aristocrats, from the slave who stoked the fires to the priest who conducted the sacrifices. Later in your visit, you'll meet some of these characters again, as you start to piece together what life was like here 2,000 years ago. Here, you are looking at one of the most remarkable objects to survive from Roman Britain. In fact, one of the finest carvings to survive from the ancient Roman world. It was carved by Celtic craftsmen who came to Aquae Sulis from Gaul, but it shows symbols and ideas drawn from Roman religion. So it demonstrates the coming together of two cultures, Celtic and classical, better than any other object from the ancient world. The carved stones and column displayed here are the evidence we have for the magnificent Roman temple that once stood on this site. Dominating the design is a large circular shield shape, and in the centre, the fearsome head of a man with flowing hair and beard. Died in Bath. This is the tombstone of a Roman man who lived and died in Bath, or Aquae Sulis, as the Romans called it. It was found in the medieval town wall. It seems that long after his death, this stone from his grave was reused to help defend the town. But now it can be displayed again, and the man from Aquae Sulis can be remembered as he would have deserved. So, what does his gravestone tell us about him? He must have been well off to have had a gravestone at all. Most people couldn't afford memorials after they were dead. If you look closely, you can see he's got a beard and he's wearing a cloak. It's just possible to make out that he's holding a scroll, which shows that he was educated.
This is basically the ancient remains of the building.
This altar stood at what was then the very center of this courtyard. Imagine that the wall which slices through the space now isn't there, and you can get an idea of just how large the courtyard that surrounded the altar was. It was here that sacrifices took place. Sheep and probably cattle were brought here, slaughtered, and then burnt. The smell of roasting meat rose to heaven to tempt the gods. Much of the altar is missing now, but you can see that each corner was decorated with carvings of gods and heroes. The carved stone to the left of the altar would originally have been part of it too, a cornerstone lying where it was found more than 50 years ago. This was the main altar, where all the official ceremonies took place. But the courtyard may well have been cluttered with smaller altars that had been paid for by wealthy pilgrims, like those we saw in the previous gallery. Each altar would be decked with flowers or smouldering with incense, each bidding for the attention of a god or goddess. This gilt bronze head was once part of a statue of Sulis Minerva, goddess of the sacred spring. Once she would have worn a tall crested helmet, a sign of her prowess in battle. It was held in place by small rivets in her hairline. The head is one of the most remarkable artefacts of Roman Britain. Roman Baths manager Stephen Clues.
The head of...
You're looking at a fine example of Roman engineering. It's an overflow, built into the wall of the reservoir which the Romans had created around the sacred spring. You can really feel at the hub of things here. It's noisy, there's lots of steam rising. You can see the water flowing. It runs right under your feet, past the shop, under the glass panel on the floor, to the main drain at the far end of the gallery. It's a mundane spot in a way, just a Roman drain. But the careful construction of the Roman masonry here hints at the massive effort that went into the building. You're now at the spiritual heart of the site, the spring itself, home to the Goddess Sulis Minerva. Find a space where you can see out of one of the windows. From there, you can look down onto the steaming water as it bubbles up from deep underground. This is the spot around which the whole vast complex grew up. To stand where you are standing now was to find yourself on the very edge of the everyday world. Here, at the sacred spring, was the place where humans could communicate with the immortal gods. The Romans enclosed the spring in a building with a high, vaulted ceiling, so the atmosphere here would have been very different, more secret, dark, and mysterious.
So I'm sitting right at the Roman bath, and I've had a tour of the inside earlier. Quite an experience, I must say.